There are some things which are a tougher pill for reps to swallow, and there are some things which are easier. And it's about figuring out what are the must-dos right now, because if you put too much change onto people, A, they won't adopt new things, and B, they'll just kind of burn out and be demotivated.
Welcome to Scale Sessions, the podcast that helps revenue leaders like you boost sales and revenue to achieve business growth with in the trenches insights.
We can skip the fluff and focus on real-world strategies you can use right away.
Each episode brings you actionable takeaways from sales and revenue leaders navigating growth challenges like you. Let's dive into today's session and scale up your success. Welcome, Shabri. I'm so delighted to see you, as I haven't actually seen you for a whole year.
I can't believe it's been so long. It's great to see you.
And this time, I get to really dig into your background. So I'm really looking forward to this. Now, we've had some really impressive resumes on the podcast, but you really have held every role title in the sales function. And on top of that, managed to also run your own business. And it all started with an economics degree. What made you think sales is the right career for me?
Yeah, it's definitely not a traditional path, but I think I've always gravitated towards sales without even realizing it, whether it was, spearheading charity events at school and coming up with creative ways to sell tickets or negotiating with my parents. But I think for me, the real turning point was between my second and third year at university. And I decided to spend a summer in Arizona doing door-to-door sales, which sounds absolutely bonkers now that I say that out loud. But it started with this week-long, really intensive boot camp in Nashville. And then you got shipped off to different states with your own patch. And my luck, hotter state, Arizona. It was commission only, 45-degree heat, and I was basically knocking on strangers' doors all day. And I remember calling my mum after the first week saying, what on earth have I done? And I look back on that now and I think, 15 years later, well, actually much longer than that now, but it was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was incredibly rewarding. And you learn so much about yourself and resilience and reading people and handling objections, handling rejection. But I've always enjoyed that relationship building part of sales anyway, truly understanding what the other person needs, storytelling, asking the right questions. I'm naturally quite curious about people and their challenges. So a year later, when I finished university, I came back and I started looking at graduate roles. And this was back in 2007. So this was pre-SaaS, but software still seemed like the really natural fit, but everything was still quite traditional. And I came across Mysis, who were in the financial software space. And back then they were a public company in the UK and they were selling complex solutions to banks. And I thought, perfect. I don't need to go into banking, but it feels relevant to my economics degree. And it was in the enterprise space. So it was really meaty, complex problem solving. And I thought, well, banks aren't really going anywhere, right? So that's really how it all started.
So this must have been foundational in how you progressed up the sales ladder so quickly, because you went from SDR to head of inside sales within 4 years. What do you think was key to that outside of this amazing grounding and that brutal boot camp?
So I think when I joined Mysis, which is now Finastra, I was actually part of the first cohort of SDRs. So it was a completely new territory for the business. And I'm sure you've seen this time and time again, Nicola, but we had like super territorial AEs and AMs who didn't want to leverage us and weren't sure about us. I was trying to build relationships with marketing who thought we were going to ruin all the MQLs that they were generating. The GMs of the business didn't really understand what we did, and it was a bit chaotic, but I kind of loved it. My manager went on maternity leave quite soon after I joined, and so it was a bit of sink or swim. And I remember thinking, okay, I think this is my chance. And I made it my mission to put my hand up for projects that other people didn't want, like for really mundane stuff like fixing data quality and, reworking call scripts to improve conversion rates. And like I said, I think I've always been quite curious. So I think it was it was quite a big company. It was 5,000 people, networking internally, grabbing coffee with people from different functions, really trying to understand how this all fit together. So it wasn't just hitting my numbers and overachieving quarter on quarter. It was trying to take a step back and understand, why are we hitting them? What can we replicate? So when they saw success and they wanted to scale the team, they asked if I wanted to step up to a team lead, and I was absolutely terrified because I had to Google things like how to run a one-to-one, how to interview people. I said yes because I think, I thought it was an amazing opportunity. And then it was a progression to manager to head of inside sales. And
I think the other thing that you said is interesting is how you picked up those jobs that no one else wants. Everyone sort of ignores them or just hopes someone else will. And we've seen that as quite a common theme throughout these successful female leaders. It's like, I got stuck into all those areas that we knew were problematic, but no one else wanted to touch. So, yeah, I can see how that really impacted your growth there. So, 7 years later, you started SalesWorks. So, what led to you going from, I'm going to leave this nice, safe environment where I really know what I'm doing, to go and be bold and actually be a founder?
I get asked this question so many times, and I think it's an important one because I know there's some people that do, but I didn't wake up one day saying I want to be an entrepreneur. Like, that definitely wasn't my story. For me, what triggered it was about being passionate to solve a problem that I was seeing time and time again. So this was in 2018, and you'll remember this really well, Nicola. But role specialization was becoming huge. So companies were doubling down on, the importance of needing to have a dedicated SDR team, really kind of structured AE roles. Companies were doubling down on lead generation. It was all about the MQL back then, right? It was all about MQL qualification, nurturing, cadencing. That's when we first started to hear about, sales loft outreach, all these tools and the number of touches that it requires to hit someone, and all these new processes. And I was interviewing with founders and CEOs and revenue leaders at the time when I was figuring out what I wanted to do next. And they were all scratching their heads, asking themselves the same questions of, we need to do this, but how? And I remember thinking, I've done this exact thing across 4 different regions, and I've built and scaled teams in each of those. I've made all the mistakes and I've built the playbooks. And so I had this light bulb moment of, what if I could do this for multiple companies? And so I ultimately started SalesWorks because I really care about sales and go to market, even if that is a bit sad. But that's what was behind it. And so it started as a consultancy, but not in the I'm going to deliver a bunch of PowerPoints and disappear type of way. I wanted to roll up my sleeves and actually get it done as a practitioner, and actually build the processes, hire the people, set up the systems. And then about 12 months in, training became one of our core offerings because it was always this glaring gap. So we started with sales development. We then moved into first-time leadership development, which was obviously something that was really close to my heart. AE skills, customer success, basically wherever companies were struggling to scale their revenue teams effectively. So that's the story behind it, really.
It's really interesting because I think we put people in these sales roles and there's such limited training, and you never get taught how to be brilliant at sales at university or at school, aside from you go and do these crazy boot camp and then selling in the US, which is a fairly extreme way of doing it. What were some of the common themes you saw in that training? Where were the biggest gaps?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest gap that I saw was there was back when everyone wanted to hire entry level talent, right? And I advocate for that because that's how I started. But you cannot hire entry level talent and then neglect training, right? So you have to be able to teach someone the core skills. And there's innate skills that you have, and then there's the teachable skills. So you can't teach someone curiosity, you can't teach someone grit, you can't teach someone, all those things, but you can teach someone how to handle objections, and you can teach someone discovery, and you can teach someone negotiation. And so the biggest gap I always saw was, I want to hire these entry level people, and then we will give them some product training, which is such a fail. And I saw that time and time and time again. And then I think at an AE level, there was always an assumption that, okay, we'll hire an AE from HubSpot as an example. Oh, they've got, great experience on their CV. They don't need any training. But actually, they do, because they need training in the way you sell and your methodology. And just because someone's come from HubSpot, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to be, a 10 out of 10 on discovery or how to deliver a killer demo. And so I think, and this is still a mistake that I see companies make time and time again. Experience doesn't necessarily mean that someone doesn't need coaching and training. Like for me, coaching is a non-negotiable.
And that must have been so valuable for you as well, as what you're learning from all the people you're training. Did you have some lovely stories as well about people who've now gone on to be very successful sales leaders?
Yes, I think for me, the course I loved, and I actually personally delivered it even when we did grow the team at SalesWorks to, a bunch of trainers and coaches. But the one that I always delivered myself was the first time leadership course, because that was, I went into SDR leadership with, zero coaching, zero training. And like I said, I was having to kind of Google, how to run an interview. That for me, I'm still in touch with all the delegates. We had about 300 delegates that have gone through that program, and it's really nice when I see on LinkedIn that they've been promoted from head of to VP, etc. For me, I think that was my favorite course.
Did you see them really transform over the course duration as well and get their confidence in leadership?
Yes, and it wasn't about patting myself on the back, but like for me, that was definitely, and lots of women find themselves in this position. I think actually when you can see proof and you can see like someone advocating for you, and at the end of the course, whether it was course feedback or you heard it when they committed to like their personal development plan, or they recommended other people to go on that for me means so much more than anything else, because it was actually just a bit of a vote of confidence that this is working and that I'm doing the right thing. And it's a bit of a shame that I think it tends to be more women that need that, but yeah, for sure.
You then went and sold it in 2022. So all these people are now missing out on this fantastic training from you, and you've gone back in-house as CRO at ScreenCloud. So what made you decide to go back in-house?
Yeah, another question I get a lot. I think running SalesWorks gave me this great opportunity that I feel lucky to have at the stage I did in my career, which is I got to work with and observe sales strategy live over and over again. I worked with CEOs and founders on their strategy and tactics probably over 100 times, which showed me a lot of patterns, a lot of frameworks. If you think about it, a typical VP of sales or CRO might see 2, maybe 3 scale journeys before becoming a CRO. And so I think, essentially becoming a fractional leader working alongside CROs and CEOs across different sectors, different ARRs, different markets, different price points, different product maturities. I think what I realized after my time at SalesWorks is whilst I absolutely loved solving those go to market puzzles and I'm good at it, what really motivates me is being on the journey with a team rather than parachuting in, fixing things, and then moving on. I'd done that. I enjoyed it. I'd been successful at it, but I wanted something different. And so I knew the best way to do this was to bring the expertise I built up at SalesWorks to a team that's great and but doesn't necessarily have my specific skill set. And ScreenCloud felt like the perfect fit for me. So when I joined, we were 25 million ARR, amazing technology, amazing team, but they really needed someone who'd seen the go-to-market playbook executed a number of times to help them scale to the next level. So I was ready to kind of pull all of that together and, join a company and see what we could build together.
They were already at 25 million ARR when you joined. What was the sales team set up like?
The sales team we were set up we cover SMB, mid-market and enterprise, and we were set up like that as opposed to, functionally. So we had inside sales reps in sort of SMB reps in the UK that were reporting to someone in LA. It wasn't the right structure when I joined, and it was something I observed, I knew that needed to change. We had, AMs, AEs. There was kind of a lack of real clear roles and responsibilities, and the leadership as well. In my sales leadership team, we also, we weren't set up in the right way. So a lot of my focus in the last 11 months has been on reshaping and rebuilding that team, which is what I love doing. And so I'm lucky that I got to do that and kind of rebuild the team from scratch as well.
I think there's a lot of discussion at the moment about what SDR teams should look like. And so I'd love to hear from you, be it at ScreenCloud or what you've observed before that. How do you build and nurture these teams right from the beginning and get those foundations right?
It's such a hot topic, and I think it will continue to change. And I think it has changed a lot since I sold SalesWorks. The framework I developed, I think, still holds true. And that is every successful team needs a balanced measure of what I call the 4 S's. It's not rocket science, but people remember things that when it's easy, and that is skills, structure, strategy, and systems. And what I saw back then and what I see now is still the same, which is most teams throw money at one area and then completely neglect the others. So, they would spend a bunch of money on hiring amazing graduate, but then have no handover process with marketing defined, no AE to SDR alignment, no account scoring. It's like building a house with only 3 walls, right? So I think I always encourage people to think about where they are across those 4 things. But I think the profile of people that we hire has definitely evolved too. I'm seeing less and less companies not just go for the graduate straight out of university. People are, less inclined to take risk. And I think there is still a place for that. And I hope so. Like I say, it's really close to my heart because that's where I started. But I think you actually have to look at what suits your specific business model. And so the key is to define what the goal of your team is first. I've built SDR teams where there's a huge influx of marketing activity. So the focus was qualifying, nurturing those inbound leads, high volume, high velocity. I've built teams with a very targeted one-to-one AE to SDR ratio, tackling enterprise accounts like Disney and John Lewis, where it's all about relationship building and multi-threading. And then I built teams where the sole purpose was to build a talent bench for other commercial roles like AEs and CSMs. So I think you have to start with the what and the why before you think about the who.
And do you find the hiring profiles are very different depending on whether it's enterprise or SMB?
I think so. Yes, I think so. In fact, I know so. But I think it goes back to the how much are you willing to train and enable the people that you're bringing into the organization? And the answer to that question should never be not at all. It should, you've got to figure out what resources do you have internally, how good is your sales leaders at coaching, what enablement function do you have set up internally, and then thinking about there's lots of people. I had skip levels with my AEs over the last couple of weeks, and I always want to find out what's motivating you. And one of my AEs said, I really enjoy that kind of dopamine hit of closing a deal, and he's in the SMB space, and so that happens with fair frequency. Now I know if he were to move into enterprise, he's not going to get that weekly, daily dopamine hit from closing a deal because that's just not what he's motivated by. And so I think you have to understand from people, what do they enjoy doing, and then where would they best fit in the organization. And so yeah, to answer your question, like, I think absolutely that profile has to match what the skill set and what motivates that individual rep.
And are there any killer interview questions you have for SDRs which really helps you understand whether they are going to be the right fit for the business and for that role as well?
Ooh, good question. So we don't actually have SDRs at ScreenCloud. We're currently experimenting with AI SDRs, which is a whole other conversation.
Right, we might be going on for 2 hours here.
So I haven't actually hired SDRs in the last it's 12 months here. But in terms of what I've always put in place is always whoever I'm hiring, even SDRs, is put in place a practical task where they can really showcase their skills. And they're not going to necessarily have as much experience to lean into on that as an enterprise AE would. So the task will differ. But what I'm looking for with SDRs is how are they communicating? How curious are they? So I've asked questions before, like, what was the last skill or something like that you learned, and actually can see them talk about stuff. Before, I've also asked SDRs, the final task is to present for something for 5 minutes that they are more of an expert on than I might be, Because if I can see them talk about something that they're really passionate about with excitement and curiosity, then to me, that's some of the raw skills that I don't think you can teach. But if they talk for 5 minutes with no energy and little excitement and enthusiasm about skiing, and I'm like, okay, this is, this is going to be difficult to get you to learn
Yeah.
a new product. So I think there's some fun things that you can do there, even if you're hiring fresh out of university.
And it makes the interview fun as well. One topic that's come up a lot at pavilion dinners recently, and I hope to see you at one soon, is that move up market. And I've seen quite a few people struggle because, like, well, I've still got the same sales team, but we're going from like mid-market SMB up to enterprise. How do you make sure that you're training teams on that new way of selling? And do you even think that's possible? Or do you think it's actually a very different type of person that you need for that?
I need to come to the next dinner where they're talking about this because
I needed you there.
I think I've seen firsthand that it's not the same person, and I think for me at ScreenCloud, I think having those territories defined really clearly has been really important. So what is an SMB AE responsible for? What is a mid-market AE responsible for? And what is an enterprise AE responsible for? And everything is different within that. Ramp expectations are different. We just built an enterprise AE ramp scorecard as an example. Pipeline generation metrics are different. There's so much that I think, and then like you say, the skill set is inherently very different. Our enterprise sales cycle is about 9 months, and we're selling to your enterprise organizations, whether it's American Airlines or, CVS or Tesco. And so for me, that sales process is very different to you selling a 3K ACV deal for a school. And so we're across industry as well. So it's been really interesting actually to kind of work through what the structure of that looks like. But what I've learned is you can't get your SMB AEs to start selling into enterprise overnight. And if you want to create a career path, which I advocate for, you need to bake in the right amount of time for that individual to get up to speed with a complete new way of selling.
The motivations are very different as well. So if it's about that dopamine hit, that person is not necessarily going to be incentivized or going to last in an enterprise role. So how do you structure the team at the moment, given that you've got SMB up to enterprise and you've also got all these different industries as well?
Yeah, good question. So we've got so everyone is either an SMB mid-market or enterprise. As the team has got bigger, they are now taking specific industries as well. But we actually launched outbound for the first time 6 months ago. So this will music to your ears, Nicola. When I joined, we were like 95% inbound, which blew my mind, right?
Dreamy.
Well, to me, getting to 25 million ARR, when
Just
you're
on inbound.
all inbound speaks to the product market fit. So for me, I had a really exciting challenge on my hands of how do we scale this through partnerships, outbound, etc. And so one of the things that we did when we started outbound was we invested in Clay because everyone was investing in Clay, and we went through really detailed account scoring because it's not just about having a total addressable market where you have 100,000 companies that you can go and target. We wanted to define what is and where is our extreme right to win, and what does a top scored account look like for us. So we decided to map out all the different criteria that would feed into a top account. So it might be so our personas that we sell to are comms and IT. So it might be if they have a comms team bigger than 5 people, that triggers a score of, you get 5 points for that. If they're a customer of one of our partners, that's another 10 points because we know about the mutual value proposition there. So all of these things then triggered this score. So we then ended up with these account scores where we've put a lot of work into those in the enterprise space, where it isn't just a dial and burn. It's actually we're going to treat these like our tier 1 accounts essentially. And so reps now have a proper territory with those accounts defined, and then the idea is that you would build up the stories and the knowledge within that particular industry. Let's say it's manufacturing, so you actually are the enterprise AE for manufacturing.
And with all of the restructure, which sounds very logical, how did you ensure that the sales team came on that journey with you and were really brought into it? Because they've obviously got the way of working that they're used to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this has been one of the bigger challenges, because, I brought 2 new VPs of sales in, a new head of partnerships in, new reps in. So it's not just the people that are new, but also we've implemented a huge amount of process, structure, rigor. Today is PG Tuesdays. We have a dedicated day for pipeline gen every Tuesday. All, outbound is new. I reworked commission plans.
Oh, that's always sensitive.
And for the better, I think. But there are some things which are a tougher pill for reps to swallow, and there are some things which are easier. And it's about figuring out, like, what are the must-dos right now? Because if you put too much change onto people, A, they won't adopt new things, and B, they'll just kind of burn out and be demotivated. Um, 80% of the AEs at ScreenCloud are new and have been hired in since me and my VPs had joined. And I think it's really important in that interview process to actually really set expectations, because a lot of reps ask, like, there's been a lot of change, there's been a lot of turnover, what can I expect? And I think it's really important in those conversations to be really open and really honest about the challenges in the past and why these changes have happened. And I think with the 20% of reps that are still at ScreenCloud and, they're great performers, I think for that, it's about taking them on that journey. And the biggest thing I've learned is you have to explain the why behind every decision. You can't just say, well, we're implementing PG Tuesdays and, that's now it. You really have to take them on that journey of why is everything so important. And we're shifting much more towards a high performance sales culture and a culture of accountability. And so even implementing things like reps now do a QBR at the start of every quarter, that was a big shift, right? It's about, you have to put the time into this and treat your territory and your number like your own business. I would say the lesson I've learned from that is don't expect 100% overnight. But if you can see incremental progress, things are moving in the right direction, but don't expect monumental change overnight.
How are you managing the board expectations and the leadership team? Because I know what it's like. They're like, right, we're making a change. We're going to get a huge increase in revenue overnight.
That's definitely been something to navigate through. And we have a new board. So we got acquired by Tenzing Private Equity a couple of months ago now.
Oh,
And so,
congratulations.
yeah, really exciting. And Tenzing are an amazing partner for us. And, part of the due diligence process was actually going through, I'm still relatively new, but still going through what my vision was for the team, what are the changes that we've made. I think across the leadership team, I think the hardest thing to manage has been the expectations of how long does it truly take to build an enterprise sales function. I can hire the best enterprise sales reps in the world tomorrow, and I would like to think I already have them, but I could hire the best enterprise sales reps in the world tomorrow. It doesn't mean that you start closing $500,000 deals next month, right? And so a part of this has been around how long does it truly take? Like, just because we receive enterprise hand raisers on our website doesn't mean that we're geared up to sell enterprise. Our product, I think, is actually there, where I think we have not done ourselves justice in the past is actually around, like, the people that we've had to do that. And so we've hired dedicated enterprise reps now to do that, who have experience in deals and managing relationships like this.
And how long do you think it takes to build out an enterprise sales team?
I would love to hear other people's opinions on this. I think you need the first year to lay the foundations, and I don't think any board or investor or CEO wants to hear that, but I think it's the truth. I think that you can define what are the green shoots of success that you can see in Q1, in Q2, and Q3. But I think if you look at most enterprise sales cycles taking 9 to 12 months, that's when you're really going to start to, like, see the ARR come in. And then you have to look at, do you have the right CSMs to service enterprise customers, which is inherently very different. And so do we have enterprise grade support? And actually, I think for us, we actually did it the other way around. So we have, like, enterprise level security, we have enterprise level integrations. So we actually did it the other way around. But I think, to really see this repeatably and scalably, I think you're looking at the 12 months.
I can see so many people listening to this clipping that little part and then sending it to their founder Thank you. And this also enables me to be able to answer these questions. Like I say, well, as Shabri says, when it comes up at the next pavilion meal, which it definitely will. Now, I have to ask, because you mentioned it earlier, you're moving to outbound and you're going AI first with SDRs. Tell me about this decision.
So because we weren't doing outbound before, pre 6 months ago, I said, okay, I believe that every AE should be able to do self-generation pipeline as well. So we're going to test this with AEs responsible for generating their own pipeline. They have so much coming from inbound. You know, we've got a good partnerships motion now in place, but AEs need to be responsible for that. What I didn't want to do was hire 5 SDRs and not set them up for success without necessarily trying that. And so what we've done is we've implemented AI SDRs to help with qualification and really actually speed to lead as well. We have an SLA in place of 15 minutes, but as you can imagine, it's not always 15 minutes. And so what we want to do is actually free up the AE bandwidth with that initial point of contact, with the AI SDR doing that. And we're 2 months into that. We actually got the data back yesterday. And it is working. So it's interesting. So it's working on meeting to MQL. So when the request comes in, the MQL conversion, what's actually a little bit lower, which we're digging into right now, is MQL to opportunity. So I don't have much more on that at this stage, but where I think the AI SDR really plays a role is efficiency. And I think especially at that SMB and mid-market piece, it's all about efficiency. Our average sales cycle for SMB is now down to 17 days. When I joined, it was 40. And so, you know, we've made some good progress there. And I think we still can. But what I still see is, you know, reps spending time on a deal that we could put through self-serve as an example. So we're just trying to figure out what is the best role that can play. And then I think if I think back to when I was an SDR, where I spent so much time was pre-call research. And in that time, buyers have also expected you to come to the call not asking stupid questions that you could find the answer to. And so where I think that AI SDR is really helping is actually we now have it integrated on our Salesforce where you can look at the account research that's on there. So there's no reason not to do it. We try to integrate it into that journey as much as possible, where that research is pre-populated for you, where the right questions to ask are pre-populated for you, where it's all there. There's no reason to not do it. And so that for me, if I think back to when I used to do that, and this was pre-chat GPT, obviously, that used to take me a couple of hours per call. And then you'd get on the call and you'd qualify out and you'd think, what a bloody waste of time. So I think there's some different use cases for AI SDRs. And I think that will then hopefully start to then shape when we do hire SDRs, what role is it that they would actually play?
I could talk about this for hours, but I do think that whole efficiency play is so interesting because I read in the Ebster report that SDRs and A's are spending less than 20% of their time actually speaking to customers or prospects because of all the admin. And it's like, how do we actually remove this? And what you said about the self-serve piece, and you've still got sales involved, they're basically order taking. Is that the best use of resource? Sadly, we've got to wrap up here, but I might have to have you back on to do an AI special. But I've just got a few quick fire questions to finish up on. So first up, what's the biggest lesson you've learned in your career?
You don't have to be perfect at everything. Play to your strengths and let others handle your weaknesses.
What's one habit or routine that's helped you succeed?
A quarterly personal board meeting that I treat like my own performance review, that I sit down once a quarter with my mentor to basically go through that myself. And I just find that gives me the outside perspective and keeps me accountable.
That is a brilliant one. I think I'm going to borrow that. What's one book or podcast you recommend?
I'm absolutely loving Kyle Norton's podcast, the Revenue Leadership Podcast, right now.
I haven't listened to that one, so I'm going to add that to the list. How do you switch off after a busy day?
Taking my dog Sasha out for a walk in the Surrey Hills, phones on airplane mode, and completely clears my head.
And which female leader in your network should we interview next?
I would say Laura Moniz de Aragal. She's a phenomenal revenue leader, a close friend too, but she has an amazing track record. So I would definitely recommend you speak to her.
Fantastic. Right, Laura. Expect an email from me soon. Thank you so much, Shabri. That's been wonderful. I just wish we had longer. And I think I'm going to have to take you out for dinner and just hear more about this trip to America.
It's
So
actually
fascinated
not
by
on my
this.
LinkedIn, but maybe it should be. But
I think it should be. I think you could write a book about this, like my route to success started here back in my university days. I think that would be amazing. Ah,
thank you so much for
well,
having me, Nicola. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope to see you at a Pavilion event.
yes, please.
Thanks for tuning in to Scale Sessions. If you found today's insights valuable, be sure to subscribe and leave a review.
Stay connected for more no-nonsense advice to help you scale your business, drive revenue, and achieve your growth goals.